All right. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Ilami. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Dr. Ilami.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Good
All
morning.
right. So we
Good
start immediately. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning.
That's for you.
Yeah, why am I not sharing screen? On the topics we have covered so far, especially the price system, it's quite a broad topic. And there are some aspects I would have loved us to touch, but because of time, we have already started with a new topic, the theory of firm. But before we continue with the theory of firm, any question on the price system? I asked you to read up some things on your own. So I want to believe that that has been done. But if you have any clarification,
Try. I'll give you. I need a back card. I'll give you one in there. I'll give one in there.
I believe you can hear me clearly.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I want to confirm if you can see my screen too, because
Not
I'm
yet,
going
ma'am.
to start sharing screen.
I can't see
No,
it.
ma'am.
All right. Once you
It's
start
showing now.
seeing the screen, please let me know.
It's showing now.
We can see it now.
See the screen now.
Yes, ma'am.
I see it now.
All right. So, like I said, if you want any more clarification on the price system, equilibrium, elasticity, and specifically, there is a particular aspect that I could not touch, and I will want us to have it at the back of our mind when we talk about application of the theory of demand, application of the theory of supply. It is applicable in some aspects. And one of the key aspects we have already mentioned is that equilibrium is just one form of application. But there are other forms of application that I might have skipped. So there is this particular one that we talk about. I don't know whether you are familiar with that, but if you are not, I will advise that you take your notes and note down in case you see questions on the application of the theory of demand, application of the theory of supply. So note it is applicable in price control. Price control. Have we heard that before? Now, as far as price control is concerned, oftentimes we call it either we say minimum price or the maximum price. Now, when we say minimum or maximum price, what we are simply saying is the government in its authority is trying to see how they can make rules and regulations to control prices by placing either a minimum price or a maximum price. So for our typical equilibrium, whenever we say price control, if we have minimum price below the equilibrium price. So I may not be able to share the material I used last week, but a typical equilibrium, when I asked you that if you have any equilibrium price at the point where demand is equal to supply, we have situation where you could have any other price that is below the equilibrium price, and we could also have any that could be above the equilibrium price. In such instances, those are the ones that we refer to as either the maximum price or the minimum price. So a maximum price, you can place it below the equilibrium price or above the equilibrium price. Likewise, minimum price. So in economics, whenever we try to describe how your government controls prices by saying nobody should sell below a particular price, or by saying nobody should sell above a particular price. So those are the instances where we refer to as equilibrium, as a minimum price or maximum price. Now, I want us to take note of this. Quickly jot, a minimum price can also be referred to as price floor. I hope you got that clearly. I want us to respond to that. Price floor. Have you heard of price floor before? Most time, it is always easy for the government to try to at least declare that this is the barest minimum price that things should be sold. And it is also common for government to say that any other price that should go above this should not stand. So when we are saying minimum price, at times you can as well refer to it as price floor. And another way of describing it is when we say price ceiling, S-E-I-L-I-N-G, ceiling. That is otherwise referred to as maximum price. So when you say maximum price, you either call it maximum price or price ceiling. Now, before I move on with this topic we started last week, another application is when we are talking about minimum wage. I know you have heard that before. Minimum wage, you know, in wage determination. So the best way of putting that is when we say the theory of demand and supply is applicable in wage determination. Wage determination, you know, any authority, any government, any nation, they always talk about how do you determine wages or salaries that are commensurate with your labor efforts, or that are commensurate with what hello. So when we talk about, just mute everyone. So when we talk about, I'm not, somebody is raising up his hand, I'm not entertaining that yet. So you hold on, you ask your question later. So let's continue with, so I've already said it, that we have it in wage determination. So we have two so far, in price control and in wage determination. The third one is when we talk about housing. In housing, in determining pricing, housing pricing. Now for housing, at times you could say that demand for housing, supply of housing, how do you determine the prices or the cost of houses? So that is one other key area in housing, in determining houses, the cost and the prices of houses. So that is another way. Now the last one, I will not call it the last. We have other form of applications too, but we have typical one that everyone is used to. Those are the one in wage determination, in determining housing prices or pricing of houses, then in determining exchange rates. So another application is determining exchange rates. So for now, let's stop there. But before I continue with this new topic, I will want specific questions on the price theory, on the price system. So I know I've muted everyone, but at this point, I will want to unmute again. I'm sorry, not everyone. Whoever wants to ask specific question, you indicate by raising up your hand. So the price system, we have been able to cover some areas. Michael, you can ask your question now while I try to share some other things with you.
Good morning,
yeah, good morning, Michael.
Okay, Ma, you said there's minimum price and maximum price.
All
so
right.
my question is there equilibrium price?
Of course, I have already mentioned equilibrium price before mentioning whatever the minimum or maximum price is.
Okay, Ma. Thank you, Ma.
So, like I said, the equilibrium price is there, at which the demand equals supply. And equilibrium is like a state, like a statutory state. But any deviation from equilibrium could either be the minimum price or the maximum price. Now, the minimum price or the maximum price oftentimes is either placed below the equilibrium price or above the equilibrium price, but not necessarily at the equilibrium price.
Okay.
So there was something that I explained last week through the graph. Now I want to quickly get back to the graph now. That is what I'm trying to open, because I want us to get this clearly. Now, if we are following what I said last week, there was that graph of equilibrium. So once it opens, I will explain further, where I showed us that we could have excess demand, excess supply. Now, for these two, when any deviation from equilibrium, you could have it either below the equilibrium or above the equilibrium. And as such, we are talking about minimum price and the maximum price. So any such explanation, you will definitely note that we have, sorry, I've already opened it. So for clarity, let me just go to, let me just see, are we in the right place? Yeah, we are in the right place. So let me just quickly explain further with this diagram. I believe we can see the diagram. I went back to equilibrium now. PE is the equilibrium price I've been talking about. And I said that most time there could be a deviation from this price, either deliberately or not deliberately. So what you are saying is that you as a consumer, you are ready to pay this price, which the supplier is also willing to supply. But there could be instances where there could arise deviation from this price. So whenever we have this price move down, definitely you will be somewhere here. And at such point, you have a price that is below the equilibrium. And once you have any price that is below the equilibrium, at such point, you have excess demand. Because if you look at any points here that is below the equilibrium price, demand, the quantity demanded at that point, if you trace it to the demand curve, you will see that it is higher than that of supply. So if you look at the supply curve, compare it with the demand curve, you will see that we can likely have what we call excess demand at this point. So any point below the equilibrium price could lead to excess demand. And at such point, we could have also what we call the minimum price. The minimum price simply states that any price that goes below that should not be accepted. So once the authority places a minimum price, you are indirectly saying that any price that falls below that particular price should not be accepted. Now, like I said, anything minimum may not necessarily be below the equilibrium price. What you can have below the equilibrium price can be excess, it can be what? Excess demand. But you can have minimum price below the equilibrium price as well as above the equilibrium price, depending on what the government has in mind. So for instance, if we say this equilibrium price is 10 naira and the government fix a minimum price at 15 naira, it does not necessarily mean that the minimum price should be 10 naira, that is the equilibrium price. So minimum price is just pointing to that fact that this is the barest minimum that anyone should pay. So on the other hand, if you are asking now, if we are, on the other hand, if we are asking, sorry, let me start recording my from this end here. All right, so that you people can have access to it later. So like I said, if it is the other hand and the government fix a maximum price, what that simply connotes is that should be the maximum that should be paid. That should be the maximum at which supply should be made. So any other price that should go above that is not accepted. So if I ask you the question that must the minimum or the maximum price be the equilibrium price, the answer is left for you to note. So you will now tell me, is yes the answer or no the answer? So must it necessarily be the equilibrium price? I know some of you will already know the answer to that, whether it is yes or no. So on the equilibrium, on the application, I will want to round up with a very common concept in economics that is very, very key. And as we go to the advanced stage in some of our courses, this is an area you will not be able to shy away from. So I said the last application of the theory that I want to mention is when we say in exchange rate determination. So we would simply take this as demand for exchange rate. supply of exchange rate, or demand for dollar, supply of dollar. So in a typical foreign exchange market, we also use the knowledge of the theory of demand and supply in determining exchange rate. So exchange rate, when you are taking your your second semester course in macroeconomics, you will still be taught what is exchange rate itself, how do you determine or calculate it. So in determining exchange rates, you consider demand for particular currency, you compare it with the supply of that particular currency, and you now, it's just like you're in your price determination, in your wage determination, in your housing price determination. That is the same knowledge that is applicable in your exchange rate determination. So most time, the rudiments involved in determining exchange rate, a typical way is you consider whether that exchange rate should be floating or should be flexible. So those rudiments, you will determine those ones later. But when you are taking this at advanced level, part of the things I want you to have at the back of your mind is that whether you are considering floating or fixed, or at times you mix fixed and floating, depending on the type of exchange rate that any economy is adopting. So you use this idea of demand for currency, supply of currency, majorly the popular one, the internationally acceptable one, or the ones that are majorly accepted in foreign exchange market. So you use them, you use the demand for such and the supply of such to determine exchange rate for individual countries that are involved in the foreign exchange market. So if we take this PE as our exchange rate, you use instead of price of a commodity, this time around it is the price of foreign exchange. You use this, and you now talk about the quantity of currency, the demand for that currency, the supply of that currency, and you use that idea. So it is still the same, but it now depends totally on the context in which you are using the application. So the application, I've already given those 4. That is an area I believe I missed out, and that is why I quickly went back to it. So now we will go to our topic that we have started, the theory of production, or the theory of firm. Now, as far as this topic is concerned, I've already told us that there are some prior knowledge we have on this. And based on our O-level knowledge, we can still refer back to our notes. And like I said last week, I mentioned vividly that there are times that you could be asked on the stages of production, or what you people are used to as maybe classification of production. And I said, when you are talking about classification, I believe we are still together. I want response from the class if you can hear me clearly and you can see my screen clearly. Can we see my screen? Are we together? Let me just go to the chat to know. Michael, you are still raising up your hand. Michael, I hope the person knows he's still raising up his hand. If you are not asking any question, please put down your hand.
Ma, please. I'm not ready to, I want to tell you that you muted us. That's why we're not able to answer you.
Okay, all right. Okay.
That's fine.
It was because somebody was making noise, and I could hear that interruption from the background. So whoever I want to ask question, I will ask you to unmute. So let everybody remain muted as it is. So I wanted to know if you can see my screen, but obviously I see that you can see the screen. I've told you to read up some things on your own. For instance, go back to what you know as primary production, secondary production, and give specific examples. And I have already mentioned when we said the concept of production and then the factors, and I explained what we meant by production function. Now, I will want to confirm if we have been able to cover production function to some extent so that I will know where we continue from. So we continue from this side. I want response from the class. I want to know, have we taken production function last week? I explained that it is a technical relationship that shows the relationship that is shown between the output and the input. There are other ways of describing production function too. So let me just all right, because I want response from the class, let me just at least ask one or two of you to unmute so that you can respond. If you want to respond, please raise up your hand so that I can ask you to unmute. I want to see where we have been able to cover on the theory of production. So if you are raising up your hand, I will ask you to unmute. Is anyone raising up his or her hand up? So I would just want to take it that at least we have been able to cover up to production function. Because I think I remember vividly that I said something about how what K stands for, LA stands for land, and L stands for labor. And I said, if you are trying to portray how they are interrelated, you show it through a production function. However, I will want us to note that we have different types of production function. Now, for this, I will just quickly chip in one or two. We have linear, let me say one. We have linear, what we call linear production function. So I will just use this I will just give a typical example of what we have as typical. So number two will be what we call Cobb-Douglas production function. Cobb-Douglas. So I don't know whether you've heard that before. Production function. We also have some others. It could be exponential production function, depending on the relationship between inputs and outputs. But we will just stop at three. At advanced level, you will still come across more exponential production function and all that. You will still come across more that you can still try to identify how you explain such production function. Now, for the Cobb-Douglas, I don't know whether we have had the name before. It is named after the person. But for linear production function, when we get to a particular part in the theory of production, before we round up this topic, there are some things you will be coming across when you hear constant return to scale, decreasing return to scale, or increasing return to scale. Some of these concepts, you are trying to explain how output is responding to inputs. So through a linear production function is simply telling you that the rate at which output is responding to input is shown in a linear form. It's shown in a linear or direct way. But for Cobb-Douglas production function, you could have instances where output could be responding in a particular way. That's logged me out.